2 Muslim men assaulted 2 female police officers and 1 male police officer at Manchester Airport. The jury found only the assault on the women to be a crime. In July 2024, brothers Mohammed Fahir Amaz and Mohammed Ahmad started a fight in an airport cafe, after which witnesses called the police. The men also attacked the arriving officers, beating 2 female officers and 1 male officer. Footage of the attack was released a year later, after the jury had reviewed it. The jury found one of the brothers guilty of assaulting the women, but was unable to reach a verdict on the assault of the man. Despite the fact that the footage showed him being knocked to the ground and struck repeatedly on the head, a retrial took place yesterday with a different jury. After 20 hours of deliberation, they were also unable to reach a decision and were dismissed. Europe is preparing to fight without NATO in case the US refuses to help, according to The Economist. Some armies have already begun developing secret plans for conducting military operations, both without the US and without coordinating actions within NATO. According to sources, Europeans have realized they need a plan B. At the same time, publicly discussing the issue is reportedly prohibited. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has reportedly literally banned talking about this because he believes it could add fuel to the fire. It is noteworthy that officials had previously openly denied the development of such plans. Nevertheless, Europe is now considering what the chain of command might look like if the US effectively blocks NATO's operations. In particular, as bureaucrats suspect, the US could influence the EU through the Supreme Allied Commander, Europe, SACEUR. Despite the title, this position has always been filled by US citizens who served in the Pentagon. The position is currently held by Alexis Grinkwich, a US Air Force general. In the event of a conflict of interest, he may not fulfill the role of a liaison between different European countries, as NATO doctrine intends. The British government and the liberal media have ignored the cold-blooded murder of a young Englishman by a Sikh. Yet, after George Floyd's murder, Keir Starmer took a knee. 18-year-old student Henry Novak was killed by Sikh Vikram Digwa in Southampton on December 3rd. The young Englishman called the 23-year-old Hindu a bad guy, after which the Hindu attacked him with a knife, stabbed him 4 times in the chest, and then stole his phone. Before Novak's condition became critical, members of Digwa's family managed to arrive at the scene of the crime. They laughed at the dying man and accused him of racism. Major liberal media outlets did not devote a single article to the brutal murder of Henry Novak. Moreover, even the British branch of Reuters did not consider the news important enough to include in its feed. The British media had previously devoted a great deal of attention to the death of fentanyl addict George Floyd. On the Reuters website alone, one can find over 1,000 articles about the death of the repeat offender, and current Prime Minister Keir Starmer, along with his colleagues, took a knee in 2020 in memory of Floyd. Previously, a similar silence fell over the media following the death of 23-year-old Ukrainian Irina Zarutskaya. The young woman was brutally murdered by a mentally ill black recidivist, DeCarlos Brown Jr., in Charlotte, North Carolina. After the bloody massacre, the city's mayor called for compassion toward the killer and thanked the liberal media for their self-censorship. The Taliban in Afghanistan have permitted the marriage of 9-year-old girls. The terrorists who seized power in the country have abolished the minimum age for marriage. Girls can now be married once they reach puberty, which typically occurs between the ages of 8 and 15. A document approved by Taliban leader Habibatullah Akhundzada states that the silence of a girl whom they intend to marry is a sign of her consent to the marriage. The new law also specifically stipulates that divorce is possible if the husband is deemed violent, mentally ill, or morally corrupt. However, abuse can be only one of the grounds and does not in itself constitute grounds for divorce. We remind you that a few days ago, British state propagandists from the BBC released a report in which the practice of Afghans selling their own daughters was presented as a difficult choice, dictated by poverty. In Ipswich, England, a court released an Indian man who attempted to solicit sex from a 13-year-old girl who turned out to be an undercover police officer. Sanjay Chalel, 33, who was studying psychology at the University of Essex, received a 17-month suspended sentence. The court explicitly advised him to simply return home, rather than initiating deportation proceedings. The man faced 3 charges of possessing indecent images of a child, 1 charge of attempting to engage in sexual correspondence with a minor, and 1 charge of attempting to solicit a child to participate in sexual acts. He initially denied the charges but changed his plea a week before the trial began. The U.S. Supreme Court upheld a lower court's ruling that the execution of a sadistic murderer who claimed to be mentally retarded would be inhumane. Since his arrest, the criminal has taken 5 IQ tests, none of which indicated mental retardation. In 1997, Joseph Clifton Smith drove 42-year-old construction worker Dirk Van Dam, whom he had promised a ride to a secluded location with the intent to rob him. There, the previously convicted criminal brutally attacked the man, inflicting 35 wounds with a hammer and a saw, and then stole $140, his boots, and his work tools. Later, a jury found Smith guilty of murder during the robbery, and in 1999, an Alabama court upheld the death sentence. The decision was made even before the U.S. Supreme Court banned the execution of the mentally disabled in the case of Atkins v. Virginia. In 2005, after the Atkins v. Virginia precedent had been established, Smith declared himself to be mentally disabled and filed a petition challenging his sentence with the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Alabama. At the conclusion of a lengthy trial, despite the prosecution's objections, the court sided with the criminal, even though no IQ test showed that his IQ was below 70. Last year, the state of Alabama filed a petition with the Supreme Court to overturn the lower court's decision that had deemed the sadist mentally retarded. Yesterday, the Supreme Court also ruled in Smith's favor. Zelensky threatened to launch a preemptive strike against Belarus if he perceives a threat to Ukraine. The Ukrainian president stated that his country's military has the capability to build additional fortifications and to take preemptive action in areas from which the threat originates. This applies both to Russian border regions and to Belarus, which, according to Zelensky, Russia wants to drag into the war. He also recalled that in 2022, Russian troops entered Ukraine from Belarusian territory, among other places, and promised that he would not forget this.